The first time Daniel saw her again, his breath caught like a man drowning in memories. 7 years had passed since he walked away from the woman who built him when he had nothing, away from the life that once felt too small for his dreams. Back then he had convinced himself that love was a luxury and success was survival. Now standing at the edge of the park, watching Sophia laugh with a small boy who had his eyes, Daniel realized how wrong he had been before the world called him a millionaire. Daniel and Sophia shared a life that could fit in one room and one heart. He had promised her that success would never change him, but promises fade faster than ambition. The day his app sold for millions, something inside him shifted. The late nights with Sophia turned into dinners with investors. Her laughter that once calmed his storms began to sound too ordinary for his new world. When his parents introduced him to a woman more fitting for his new life, he didn't resist. Pride whispered louder than love. Now, as he watched Sophia tuck a strand of hair behind her ear and lift the child into her arms, Daniel's chest tightened. He didn't know whether to step forward or run. The boy looked up, smiling, his smile. And in that simple moment, everything Daniel thought he had gained began to feel unbearably empty. The cars, the penthouse, the company, all of it meant nothing. Regret had finally found its voice, and it spoke her name. Daniel could not sleep that night. The memory of Sophia's smile haunted him like a melody he could no longer play. He lay in his mansion, surrounded by everything he had once wished for, polished floors, silent rooms, and the glow of success, but none of it felt alive. Every sound echoed loneliness. He thought about how easily he had let her go, how coldly he had watched her walk away without looking back. His new wife, Vanessa, slept peacefully beside him, unaware that the man next to her was miles away, trapped in the past. He remembered the day he ended it. Sophia had stood by the kitchen window, her apron dusted with flour, asking nothing but his love. "Daniel, I don't need the world," she had said softly. "I just need you." But Daniel, blinded by dreams of power and recognition, had believed he deserved more. He wanted to prove himself to the world, to be someone people remembered. What he didn't realize was that the only person who truly saw him was the one he left behind. Now, seeing the child who bore his eyes had shattered the illusion he built. He wondered if Sophia had ever forgiven him, or if she hated him as much as he hated the man he had become. The thought burned deep. He tried to distract himself with work, with meetings and calls, but her voice lingered like a whisper in the wind. That night, staring at the city lights outside his window, Daniel made a decision he never thought he'd make again. He would find her. Not as a millionaire, not as the man who abandoned her, but as the one who once promised to love her forever. Morning sunlight filtered through the glass walls of Daniel's office, but his world felt gray. His mind wasn't in the boardroom or the polished words of his team. It was lost somewhere between regret and courage. For days, he had rehearsed what he would say to Sophia if he saw her again, but every version sounded empty. The thought of facing her after years of silence terrified him. What could he possibly offer that could heal what he broke? Still, something inside him whispered that it was time. Time to stop hiding behind success and face the truth he had abandoned. That afternoon, Daniel drove to the old neighborhood where they once lived. The streets hadn't changed much, but everything felt smaller, humbler, warmer. Children played in front yards, The air smelled of bread and sunlight, and his heart raced like it used to when he carried nothing but dreams. He parked near the small bakery where Sophia once worked and stepped out, unsure if he had the right to even be there. Then, as fate would have it, she appeared, her hair tied loosely, her hands dusted with flour, and that same gentle grace that once anchored his world. She didn't notice him at first. She was busy handing a cookie to the little boy, who giggled in delight. Daniel froze, watching how naturally she moved, how happy they looked without him. When she finally looked up, her eyes met his, and for a brief second, time stood still. The warmth in her gaze was gone, replaced by a calm strength he had never seen before. Daniel wanted to speak, to say her name, but no words came. The boy tugged her sleeve, asking who the man was. Sophia smiled softly, then turned away. That quiet gesture said more than any words could. It was forgiveness, distance, and goodbye all at once. Daniel stood there long after Sophia disappeared into the bakery, the sound of her voice echoing faintly in his mind. It was as if life itself had paused to remind him of everything he had lost. He wanted to call her name, to ask her if she had ever missed him, but his throat tightened, silencing the words before they could escape. He turned back toward his car, each step heavier than the last. Inside, he gripped the steering wheel, staring at his reflection in the glass. He saw success, yes, but also a man hollowed out by his own choices. The city had crowned him a visionary, but in truth, he was only a man running from guilt. The next day, he found himself outside the bakery again, pretending it was coincidence. He watched from a distance, seeing how she smiled at customers, how her laughter filled the place like sunlight. She had built the dream she once told him about, the pastry shop she used to describe on quiet nights. A sign above the door read Sophia's Whisk, handwritten and simple. It was everything she'd wanted, and everything he'd ignored. Pride warred with remorse inside him. She had built all this without him. Then the boy appeared again, running toward her with a toy airplane in hand. Daniel's heart stopped. The child's grin was identical to the one he used to wear as a young dreamer. When their eyes met, the boy waved innocently. Daniel waved back, trembling. For a moment, he imagined walking up to them, explaining everything, telling the boy who he truly was. But then he saw the peace on Sophia's face, the life she'd created, and he froze. Maybe his presence would only reopen old wounds. Maybe love meant staying silent, watching from afar, and letting her happiness remain untouched. That night, Daniel sat in his car across from the bakery, unable to drive away. Rain tapped gently on the windshield, blurring the view of the glowing shop window where Sophia worked late, alone now after closing. Something inside him broke open. The years of pretending, of smiling through empty success, of ignoring the ache that followed him everywhere. He finally stepped out, his shoes splashing into the puddled street. Every step toward that door felt like walking back through time, through every mistake he'd ever made. When Sophia looked up and saw him, surprise flickered across her face, then calm acceptance. She didn't move, but her eyes told him she already knew why he had come. He opened the door slowly, the smell of sugar and cinnamon wrapping around him like a memory. "Sophia," he said quietly, his voice trembling. "I shouldn't have come, but I couldn't keep pretending I don't miss you, or the life we had." She looked at him for a long moment before speaking, her tone soft but steady. "Daniel, I forgave you a long time ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to what they were." Her words cut deeper than anger ever could. He nodded, swallowing the pain that rose in his chest. Then the boy entered, rubbing his eyes, holding a small blanket. "Mama, I'm sleepy," he murmured. Sophia smiled and lifted him into her arms, the gentleness of the moment freezing Daniel in place. The child looked at him curiously again, then buried his face against her shoulder. Daniel's voice cracked. "He's mine." "Isn't he?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth was there, in the boy's eyes, in the weight of silence between them. Daniel felt tears well up, not of regret alone, but of realization. He had traded his greatest treasure for a life that never filled him. Daniel drove home in silence, the road stretching endlessly before him, lit by the glow of city lights that now felt meaningless. The truth had stripped him bare. His success, his fame, his wealth, all of it seemed like dust compared to the simple warmth of the home he once had. He reached his mansion, yet it no longer felt like a place to live, only a monument to what he had sacrificed. As he entered, Vanessa greeted him with her usual elegance, but her words sounded distant, her world completely different from his. He nodded absently and retreated to his study, shutting the door behind him. He sat by the window, staring at the skyline. His reflection looked older, lonelier, and smaller than ever. The silence pressed down on him until he whispered, "What have I done?" That question had no answer, only memories. The way Sophia used to wait for him with dinner, the laughter that filled their little kitchen, the hope in her eyes when he dreamed aloud about the future. He had traded all of that for empty applause. Tears welled up, slow and heavy, falling onto his hands. He realized he had not lost just Sophia, he had lost himself. The next morning Daniel made a decision. He withdrew his shares from the company, left Vanessa a letter of apology, and walked away from the life that had once seemed perfect. He returned to the park where he first saw Sophia again, sitting on a bench as the wind rustled through the trees. Nearby, the boy played with his toy airplane, laughter echoing in the air. For the first time in years, Daniel smiled, not because of success, but because he finally understood what truly mattered. It wasn't fortune that defined him. It was love, humility, and the courage to start again, even if forgiveness would never be his to claim.